Good day and Assalamu alaikum. I am teacher Yumi, and for today's lesson, we are going to tackle about grammatical structure. For a beginning, let us refresh some basic facts about sentence first. A sentence contains a verb or a verb phrase. So here we've got, she finished her results section. Finished is the verb. Finished her results section could be known as the verb phrase, or you might also know this as a predicate. A sentence follows subject, verb, object, word order. So this might differ in English than in any other languages. So if you are a multilingual speaker in your native language, this might not work the same way. But in English, our sentences do start with subjects. So here we have she, and the verb finished, and object her results section. And then, a sentence must have a complete idea that stands alone. And this might also be known as an independent clause. So if you remember back from any grammar classes you've had in the past, you might have heard this referred to as well as an independent clause. Now, let us talk about simple sentences. Basically, a simple sentence needs to have a subject and a predicate. The subject then is who or what is responsible for the action of the sentence. The predicate again, this also might be known as a verb phrase depending on your history with grammar. This is what the subject does or what the subject is. There needs to be some kind of punctuation at the end. And in this case, we've got a period. And again, we have to have a complete idea or a complete thought. Okay. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of this. So if I look at this first example, I've got I write in my journal every day. Well, in this case, the subject is I, and the predicate is write in my journal every day. Write is the verb, and then write in my journal every day is the noun phrase or the predicate. For the second example, here we have Maria as a doctor at Mercy Hospital. So similar to the first one, we've got Maria as the subject, and then we have is a doctor at Mercy Hospital as the predicate, and is your main verb there. For the last example, we have a more complex subject here. Okay, so here we have all of the 5th grade students. That is all the subject. And then we have will take a test next week. That's the predicate. And will take there as the main verb there. You can see again at the end of this, we always have punctuation at the end, right? A compound sentence joins together two or more independent clauses into a single sentence. You can connect the independent clauses into two ways. The first one, using a comma and a coordinating conjunction between the clauses. The second one, using a semicolon. Independent clauses are basically complete sentences. They are simple sentences. Now, we call them independent clauses. It's just kind of another name for the structure. So here are a couple of examples. I am often busy and tired. The second sentence, I struggle to meet my deadlines. The two examples have predicate, meaning a verb, and extra information and a period at the end. Therefore, they are complete ideas. If we decide that it's appropriate to combine independent clauses, there are few ways to do it. The first one is to use a semicolon. So in this case, I'm often very busy and tired. Semicolon. I struggle to meet my deadlines. Rather than separating them into two separate sentences, we could use a semicolon to show that the ideas are connected into a compound sentence. Notice that I did not add any other words, no and or other words to the sentence. It's not needed. A semicolon is a stronger connector, so it doesn't really need any other words or extra information to connect the ideas. Also, notice here that I have an incorrect example of the semicolon. This sentence has an end. The one in the bottom did not need the end. And also, just remember a semicolon should really only be used to connect two sentences or two ideas that are very closely related. It would be inappropriate to use a semicolon to connect two independent clauses that are kind of unrelated, where the meaning is unrelated. Another option is to use a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So, coordinating conjunction, that might be a new phrase to some people. I'll explain those as well. So here's my example again. I'm often very busy and tired. I struggle to meet my deadlines. Here's an example where I used a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So, coordinating conjunctions are words like and, so, but, or. Those words work along with a comma to connect two independent clauses. So notice that the comma comes first after the first independent clause. And then we have the coordinating conjunction, in this case, and then the second independent clause. Notice in the incorrect example that only a comma here is problematic. The comma is not really, strong enough in this case to hold the two sentences together. This actually creates what we call a run-on sentence or a comma splice, meaning that there are two independent clauses connected by a comma, but the comma is not strong enough on its own. It needs to work along with one of those coordinating conjunctions. So here's kind of the basic formula that you can use when combining compound sentences. On the formula, there are independent clauses on either side, and then the ways that you could connect them are by using a period. So that would not be connecting them, but they would stand next to each other and they would be grammatically correct. You could use a semicolon, or you could use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, of course, choosing the coordinating conjunction that's appropriate to show the relationship between the two ideas. And I have all 7 of the coordinating conjunctions listed here. If you read down the first letter of each word, it spells out fanboys. And that was kind of a little trick that I used to remember them when I learned about them. So if you ever kind of forget what are those 7 words that can function as coordinating conjunctions, think about the acronym fanboys, and that might help you remember what they all are. A complex sentence uses one main independent clause and dependent clauses with any number of subordinate conjunctions, while compound sentences use coordinating conjunctions to join the clauses together. Complex use subordinating conjunctions. Now, we're going to talk about combining independent and dependent clauses to talk about complex sentences. Independent clauses are complete sentences, as I have said earlier. They can function all by themselves. They could be their own sentence, but we can also combine them to make compound sentences. Now, we're going to talk about dependent clauses. Dependent clauses are also called sentence fragments, and dependent clauses are They have some of the same aspects as an independent clause. They typically have a or in the cases we'll talk about. They have a subject and a predicate. But they also have extra information and along the bottom here. I have a complete sentence needs letter A subject, B, a verb, and C, a complete idea. So this says something I just mentioned before, but will come into play here. So as you can see, the first part of the sentence is a dependent clause because it cannot function independently as its own complete idea. If I just write, because I am often very busy and tired, and I stop it there, it does not indicate a complete idea. It does not communicate a complete idea. It seems like there is something missing. And so, that's how dependent clauses are often a part of an idea that really needs extra information to be complete. Dependent clauses often begin with subordinating conjunction, another kind of word or phrase that we use when we talk about grammar. It's not 100% like necessary that you use the term subordinating conjunction, but at least understanding the idea will be important here. So, many but not all dependent clauses use them. They join a subordinate clause to a main clause and establish a relationship between the two. So these dependent clauses that begin with subordinating conjunctions, they begin with words like after, although, because, before, once, since, though, and so on and so forth. So we can kind of pick them out of our sentences or out of our writing by looking for some of these words. And this is not an exhaustive list. There are many other subordinating conjunctions, but this is a list of a few that you will see probably on a regular basis. And subordinate means that the clause does not express a complete idea, even if it has that subject and the predicate. Our basic formula for a complex sentence is that we're going to combine the main or independent clause with a dependent clause or phrase. And there are two main ways that we can do that. We can use the dependent clause at the beginning, and it acts kind of like an introductory clause. Conversely, we can have the dependent clause at the end. So, notice the structure and introductory clause. It's the dependent phrase or clause, then comma, then the main clause or independent clause. To say, if the dependent clause is at the beginning, we have a comma, and if the dependent clause is at the end, notice that there's no comma needed. That's one of the main differences between the two. Alright, here's an example. We have our dependent clause. If the flight is on time. Notice, like I said previously, that this does not communicate a complete idea. We need more information. If we say, if the flight is on time, what happens? Is that so? Then what happens? For that, we need more information. And the independent clause. Tim will get home tonight. Notice that this could function as a complete sentence if necessary or in the right context. So by following our two formulas, we can put the dependent clause at the beginning. If the flight is on time, comma, Tim will get home tonight. Or we can switch it around and say, Tim will get home tonight. Notice no comma needed. If the flight is on time. In English grammar, a compound complex sentence is a type of sentence that contains at least three clauses two independent clauses and one or more dependent clauses, which equates to three sets of subjects and verbs. This type of sentence is a combination of a compound sentence with a complex sentence. A compound sentence is a sentence in which two or more independent clauses are joined together with a coordinating conjunction like for and yet, or a conjunctive adverb such as however and nevertheless. A complex sentence is a sentence that has one independent clause and one or more subordinate clauses that modify the main subject or verb of a sentence. Alright, compound complex sentences will typically be joined together with a coordinating conjunction as you would see in a compound sentence with a comma placed immediately before the coordinating conjunction. Alright, compound complex sentences can clearly convey more information than your standard compound or complex sentence. Here are some examples of compound complex sentences. There was heavy traffic in the neighborhood, so I used the GPS to find a quicker route and was able to get there on time. In this example, there was heavy traffic in the neighborhood, and I used the GPS to find a quicker route are two independent clauses joined by the coordinating conjunction so, and followed by the dependent clause, and was able to get there on time. For the second example, the cat ran away, but nobody was worried because he was trained to find his home. In this example, the cat ran away and nobody was worried are the two independent clauses joined by the coordinating conjunctions but and followed by the subordinate clause because he was trained to find his home. And the last example, since she was a vegetarian, she refused to eat the turkey, but she was more than happy to eat the potatoes. In this example, the dependent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, since she was a vegetarian, and is followed by two independent clauses. She refused to eat the turkey, and she was more than happy to eat the potatoes, which are joined by the conjunction but. Sentence structure is how all the parts of a sentence fit together. So if you want to have an advanced grammar and interesting sentences, you first have to understand how sentence structure works. With this, it will help you communicate clearly, correctly, and confidently. Once again, this is your teacher Yumi, and let's call it a day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.